You might recognize your character has dysfunctional ways of thinking or behaving or emoting and say, okay, that's not useful anymore, and stop it.
We want to explore the idea that you don't have to be any of those things. Let's look beyond the things that you are identifying as and look at the thing that is identifying.
Give me an idea of how much work you did to achieve the profound depths of consciousness that you have.
Pay your bills, go to school, all that stuff. That's going to be great. It's going to be cute. But at the end of the day, you're going to be suffering throughout all of it, never satisfied at any point in time in your life. That sounds horrible. Leo.
So the reason that I wanted to interview you specifically is because you seem to have achieved extremely deep level of understanding of what consciousness and reality and truth and being are, to such a degree, in fact, that it's hard to describe just how significant such an understanding can be. So how can we describe this to someone who's new to this, who hasn't really studied this much or hasn't even done much meditative or contemplative work? How do we describe just the significance of what this work entails?
Leo asking the question, how do we describe the significance of this work? Now, that is a difficult one. So how do we describe consciousness work? How do we describe enlightenment work? How do we describe spirituality? This is such a tricky one. This is such a hard one, right?
That's a big question.
How do you describe consciousness work? Okay, this is such a difficult thing because generally the descriptions that we want or the descriptions that other people want are descriptions that are stuck within the domain of our typical normal logic and normal reasoning and normal understanding. And generally, it's rather unfortunate because some people think that whenever people talk, they must be speaking within this domain of typical normal linear logic, typical normal knowledge, typical understanding. But we're trying to talk about something outside of that. And there's lots of traditions who do this and talk about it. The people who are asking about it aren't familiar with these traditions. So they feel like language is sort of theirs. They've taken it hostage. When we want to describe something, we can't, we're stuck. It's difficult to say, hey, I'm using language here, but it's not in the same way that you use language. It's completely, we're doing something very different here. It's a whole different activity. That's the trap. I think you front load with that, but in my experience, that doesn't work usually. So I don't know.
See, when you talk about this work, then I hear my work.
Let's talk about this work.
And if I hear my work, this is more than enlightenment. One aspect, a very central and important aspect of the work is having a direct consciousness, becoming directly conscious of something ultimately true or absolutely true.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Like your true nature.
Okay.
Or what existence is. But the work is more than that. It's also grasping, using enlightenment as the kind of foundation or the base. It's grasping, what is mind? What is language? What is being a self? What is thinking? What is communication? Etc. I mean, just all down the board. What is anything? Just put what is in front of it and you got it.
Just put what is in front of it. What is blank? Insert anything. We're doing the work. What is communication? What is language? What is self? What is mind? What is thinking? It's very difficult. Well, they're not very difficult, but again, since we have this sort of habit pattern, at least me personally, and probably a lot of people who are modern people have this sort of habit pattern of using language to refer to a typical type of learning and a typical type of understanding. So when people say, what is thinking? They think that they need to think it through. That's a problem, right? It gets tricky.
Basically the foundation for the studies. Now, the thing that probably people won't grasp right away is that there's a possibility of actually you personally becoming directly conscious of these things. So it's not like finding an answer. It's not like a belief system. It's antithetical to a belief system. If you believe something, you're actually doing something that's getting in the way.
True.
So we're not ever inviting people to believe in something. We're inviting people to experience for themselves what's true. Now, when I say experience for themselves what's true, I can hear that, in different ways. People might think, all right, then I'll have my opinion about it, or I'll draw conclusions, or I'll figure it out.
No conclusions.
And the reason people will assume that is because that's pretty much what people do. That's pretty much what people think they can do in these kinds of matters, is just believe something, hear about something, or draw conclusions or figure it out. But those are all functions of mind and hearsay. And they're quite minor to the work. So people aren't invited to figure something out. Sure, of course, we will do that. People will do that. They'll figure things out, they'll conclude, they'll believe, they'll have opinions. But all of that is pretty much nonsense compared to a direct experience. So we're always inviting people to grasp for themselves, beyond themselves too, not just, okay, I grasp it for myself like it's my own little, like I said, like opinion or something, or I have my own idea about it. But to grasp for themselves the truth. And that isn't something that's commonly shared as possible.
Yeah, grasping something for yourself, the truth, but not a conclusion. So again, this is where we get a little bit strange with some of the language, right? We have this idea of when you learn information, you get something. Even if you have a method for doing something, you get information from the method, you do a method, you put something in, you get something out. And we think of that output as the conclusion. Generally, this is how we think about things. We get some conclusions. That's not what we want here. We don't want conclusions. No conclusions. Conclusions are fun. They're cool. I like conclusions. They're cute. We don't want conclusions, so that's not the basis of all of this stuff. You don't want to start convincing other people of your conclusions. Don't do that. Teach them the method, maybe. Teach yourself the method, really. Focus on the method. But conclusions are more of an issue, more of a problem. They're fun, they're interesting, and we want to watch that fun and that interest with the conclusions. But we don't want to get caught up in the conclusions. I like this idea of him saying that the beliefs are not what we really want. The beliefs are sort of antithetical. I'm not sure how strongly he thinks that they're antithetical. They're kind of cute. They're fun. I like to think of it in the way like we're sort of normal. We're wearing clothing. We're sort of wearing clothes. And what we want to do is to replace our clothes. We take off our clothes and we put on different clothes. We sort of work between different worldviews. The clothing would be our worldviews, our beliefs, our frameworks for seeing the way that the world works. We have a particular one that's sort of built up by society and built up by schooling and indoctrination and other stuff, whatever. And that's kind of fun. And then we just remove them and put on different clothes, which would be all the belief systems in whatever spirituality you want to, uphold. Just pick one, it doesn't matter. And then you've got all these interesting new clothes and you can see how they fit. They're nice, you like them, maybe comfortable, maybe not so comfortable, maybe you want to change again, and whatever. You keep doing this, you just change your clothes. And you don't really want to find the clothes that fit you best. That's cool, you can do that, that's cute. What you really want to notice is the time in between changing clothes, when you're naked. That's what you want to notice. Look at yourself with no belief systems covering you up, with no framework, with no filter blocking anything. You just want to see yourself bare. No ideas, no conclusions, no beliefs, and that's it. But you have to change, you kind of have to change clothes to get used to it and to being naked in between. You have to sort of change your beliefs to notice that in between you are naked. It's kind of hard to just drop all your beliefs and be naked.
We have to figure things out or
Don't learn
from others. And it's great to learn from others, but that's only one aspect of things. That's a form of knowledge that we absorb from somebody else or from science or from, history. And it can teach us stuff. But to actually, for oneself, become directly conscious, and by directly, I mean you're there. So whatever's true about your nature, you're there. You're actually, it is that. You are that. You become conscious of that, the absolute nature of you, or the absolute nature of existence. You become conscious of it. You're one with it. See? That's what I mean by direct. So experience can be misleading because most of the time people find experience in perception or, what we call experiences, emotions, things like that happening in the mind or perceiving something. And this is not what enlightenment is.
Not experiences, not perception, not emotion, none of that nonsense. This is not what he's referring to when he talks about enlightenment, right? We want a alternative to experiences. It becomes very obvious when you experience a non-experience that you've been limiting yourself to experiences. It becomes so obvious. So don't do that.
What is enlightenment in a sentence or two to somebody who doesn't grasp the significance?
Enlightenment is not a state. It's not an experience. It's not an emotion. It's not an insight. Those are all functions of mind. Enlightenment is not about mind. It's not about body either. But enlightenment is becoming conscious, and usually we don't have space for that. We don't think that we can become conscious of what's true. So I guess the first thing is we'd have to consider that what we perceive now is not what's absolutely true. And people usually don't even have that thought, because what we perceive now is everything. See, it's like everything. We think that is the world. That's everything, because that's everything that they perceive. It's everything that goes on. And then, we move on from there. But like I say,
The biggest meme.
that's a function of being an organism. That's a function of surviving in a world in which, we create perceptions so that we can do that. But it's not what's absolutely true. We don't know any more about what we are or what existence is or what life is than we did in the beginning.
True.
All we've done is actually just learn about stuff. We've accomplished, a great deal, but we've learned about stuff. But we haven't gotten a direct consciousness of what this is, what consciousness is, what self is,
What is
what
this?
existence is.
What is it?
So if we open up the possibility that we could do that, then that's enlightenment. So it's merely and only. It's not something fantastic. It's not grand. It's not, huge. It's not mundane. It's none of that. It's off the charts. It has nothing to do with charts.
Interesting. This is such a very, very base level, like super simple idea here. Super simple definition of what enlightenment is. Just having the possibility to directly be conscious of something, except that you have the possibility. That's it.
It has nothing to do with scales. It has nothing to do. That's one of the problems, you see, with all the questions and the wondering and the trying to find an answer about enlightenment, is all of that is done in the same world. It's done in a relative world, and enlightenment is absolute. It's not about a relative thing. And so when we hear absolute, we think, whoa, that's really big. It's absolute, No, it's just true. It just means absolutely true. Just the truth. Enlightenment is you yourself becoming conscious of what's true, directly conscious of what's true, like what you are or what existence is. No more than that.
No more.
And it's not hard. People think, oh, it's hard. No, not doing it is hard.
It's true.
Trying to do it might be hard, but doing it's easy.
It's easy, right? I was just called out for this earlier. It's not hard. It's not hard. Yeah, it's super easy to do, right? Well, easy to say once you get it. There's so many blockages getting people away from seeing it, from understanding. It's something so basic. Why? I don't know. I'm not sure.
See, enlightenment is simply being where you already are. Boom, done.
Done.
See, done.
How do you view yourself? I mean, what are you? Are you a human being? Are you a creature? Are you a biological entity? What are you? And how do you view your life and also the possibility of your death?
How do you view yourself? Are you an entity? Are you biology? Are you a mind? Who are you? I mean, what a tough question. Who are you? What are you? What is the balance of yourself? Are you limited to your skin? That's interesting. Are you limited at a particular moment in time? When you're born, when you're dead? Are you limited to the cells in your body? And are those limited to what is here currently? Do they change when you eat? Do they change when you excrete? Does that change when you pee or when you do other things, when you sweat, when you spit, when you bleed? When does it become you? When is it no longer you? Who are you? And how do you experience that? And if you pay more attention, what changes? I don't know.
As a self, I'm a human being.
Okay. Many different layers of the question.
And will remain a human being till I die. But if you're asking me what I am, there's nothing there.
Okay.
And it's impossible to understand what that means, because the nothing that we think isn't the nothing I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there really is nothing here, so it won't die.
There's nothing here. No one's going to die. I mean, this is very important when people ask about life after death. First step is to figure out what is alive, right? You can't determine if you're going to be alive after you die. If you don't even know it's alive, how do you define yourself? How do you identify yourself? It's very important to figure out.
I see people contemplating all the time, because this is my work.
Contemplation. Okay.
And they'll contemplate really hard and they'll dedicate themselves. But often, they won't really have the possibility that they can do it, They have in the abstract the belief that it can be done, just like I had in the abstract the belief I could buy a toaster. You know, if somebody had said, could you buy a toaster? I would have said, yes, of course I could buy a toaster. But it never occurred to me I could do that. See, that difference, that I could really do that. I could actually make it happen.
Yeah, definitely, right? This is the idea. Everything has the Buddha nature. Everything can become Buddha. Everything has that same essence. Everything has that same source, and it deserves our praise. It deserves our love, and it's going to be free. It already is. Everything has the Buddha nature. But what about this dog? Does this dog have the Buddha nature? What about me? Do I have the Buddha nature? Can I become enlightened? Everything can become enlightened. Oh yeah, I've learned that. I know that. Everything can become enlightened. But me, can I become enlightened? I don't know. I'm not sure about that one, guys. I don't know. This dog, I'm not sure if I can... that's a tough one for me to really accept. I know everything else can become enlightened. But me, I'm special. I'm special. I'm bad. I'm worse. You don't know the things that I know about myself. We always know in the abstract, I guess we know sort of intellectually, we know in some ways that everything can be enlightened. We know everything is already there. We know that the Buddha nature permeates everything. But when we really question it and we think about ourselves, we get this sort of weird somethingness, that blockage from showing our own love to ourselves. And it's unfortunate, but it's something that happens, and we want to be very aware of it if it does come up. You can, you are, you will be free.
So people contemplate. They often have, yeah, sure, it's possible, but not really for me. They don't get for me personally. I can do that. And so you have to create that possibility. You have to make it possible that you yourself can do it. And of course, you yourself can do it. Who else could do it? You know, nobody can do it for you. If it's possible, then it's possible for you because it is you. You're closer to you than anybody else. See? You're right there. See? You are part of existence. It's right here. It's not elsewhere. It's not something else. It is this. It's true now. So anyway, so that possibility has to be created. You see that one can do it, that actually in your very place, in the very place that you are now, it's possible for you to grasp what's actually true about you. Why not? It's easy.
It's easy. So again, this is a bit of the reason why we like to do this sort of, I'm going to keep calling it Guru Yoga because I like the idea of just appropriating names that I have no business using and I don't know anything about. This is Guru Yoga here that we're doing. Oftentimes we look at gurus or teachers who are a little bit, not living up to the ideal of an enlightened person, because we sometimes get this lofty sort of, only the people in Tibet, in the Himalayas, only the people who are living as hermits in the mountains can become enlightened. Only those special people. We want to remind ourselves. No. Everybody.
So you say that there's a whole world of possibilities once you have the first inkling of an insight that something new is possible. What is this world of possibilities? Where will all of that take me? If I take it to its ultimate conclusion and I contemplate everything I can contemplate, where does that take me?
Conclusions.
I would have no idea.
Yeah, see, this is the idea. Again, we get conclusions and we want to go somewhere. These concepts are sort of still hijacked by the concept of intellectual knowledge, understanding, beliefs, all that stuff. It's stuck there. So we can tell when someone asks that sort of question, where does it lead you? You're thinking in the wrong, not in the way that is appropriate for the question that you're asking. So I don't know, because knowing is not the way that you interact with it. If you're asking about knowledge, you're not going to get any of that. All that's going to be gone, or trivial, or not important. I'm not sure how to put it. You open up different possibilities when you know that you're not limited to your own experiences, when you learn that the frameworks that you've been building have been structured around your limited perspective, and that you can be free to have a perspective, you can actually experience a non-experience. Strange way to put it. You can expand so radically the perspectives that you have, the frameworks that you have, that they aren't even frameworks anymore. They're not even perspectives anymore. Since they're not perspectives and not frameworks anymore, there's no real way to describe them using the typical language that we have. You aren't really having them if you are the one that's limited to your own experiences. It gets so difficult, it gets so radical that we can't really describe any sort of conclusion. And of course, having conclusions is more of a problem, more of an issue, more of a blockage. So
you may get nowhere, you may get everywhere. You know, I couldn't tell you where it's going to take you, the contemplation. But if you you do have your first direct experience or kensho or first glimpse, that kind of opens up a whole world. First of all, it goes from being just a belief or an idea to something that's like true. After you first grasp, say, your true nature, for example, what you actually are, it's not the end of the story, it's the beginning. There's much more consciousness to have than that. You don't know everything, you know. It's like you know what your nature is, clearly, right? But that's it. You don't know what another is. You don't know what life is. You don't even know what self is, what mind is. You don't know what existence is necessarily, you know? I mean, I don't want to cramp your style. Maybe you'll know all those things all at once. Maybe. But I haven't seen it. So when you contemplate another question, for example, you know, another matter like what is another, you don't know any more than you did before. You know, perhaps it's possible to grasp, but you don't know. And so it's just as hard, so to speak. You're probably buoyed a lot by the fact that, you know, the possibility is now reality rather than just an idea. But that doesn't mean it, you know, it's any easier. Mm-hmm. And then you grasp what another is. Oh, bingo. Duh. And it's like, well, having gotten, you know, what you are, that should have been obvious, but no. I don't know why it works that way, but it does. It's like ignorance is a funny thing. And so then, you know, you grasp what existence is. And it's like, and again, and life, et cetera. Saying you start becoming more and more deeply conscious. Because as you're grasping these things, as you're grasping these aspects of, or distinctions that we make in the relative world, they, of course, as if fall into the same soup of consciousness, you see? And that's why I said, duh, you know, because over time, you see, it turns out that everything's the same. Like, I don't want to give away the story, but it turns out that you keep having the same experience, except on a deeper level. It's more and more inclusive, as if, you know. And once again, I use the word experience, and I'm sorry because then people confuse that as experience, but of course. In any case, it could take you there. So you become more profoundly clear and conscious of a lot more than you did in the beginning.
It's just, it's so difficult to even consider that possibility seriously for the average, just for the average person, for the average mind, you know, because it seems almost fantastical or philosophical.
Don't think of it that way.
Don't think of it.
Just don't think of it that way, okay? See, because when you think of it that way, you're thinking
you are God.
So you're thinking, well, I have to somehow reach outside my body and become the cup. No, you just have to grasp what it is, that's all.
Just grasp it.
You know?
Yeah.
See, it's not like sci-fi. All right.
See, the problem is that you know, the typical person will think that we have this idea of becoming a cup. We can use whatever fancy language you want to use. You become God, you become whatever. You just insert your own fancy language. And they think that this stuff is going to be invading the spaces of your normal philosophy or invading the spaces of your science or whatever, or your religion, whatever. All right, so people hear this and they're like, oh, wow, that sounds ridiculous, because that is going to change lots of stuff. If I say you don't exist, there is no self, a lot of people think that, oh wow, there's lots of implications that go in towards other things. No other implications. It doesn't invade other spaces. You can keep everything as it is. Don't change any beliefs. Don't change anything.
Because I'm always tuned.
Yeah, and that's sort of an issue, because it's hard to adopt or understand or really fully grasp these ideas if you think that becoming the cup means something about you as a person, you as an individual, you as a collection of your memories and your mind states or whatever. That's not the you that changes. That's not the you that becomes the cup. You aren't that. You are a cup. This doesn't mean that you, your memories and your body and your mind are a cup. Obviously, your mind is your mind, your body is your body, your memories are your memories, whatever. Your habits are your habits. But you are you. And you can change clothes at any point in time, and you can be a cup. You're a cup. Doesn't do anything to your mind, doesn't do anything to your body, doesn't do anything to your memories. Does something to you, though. You.
So you do have to have the possibility that you can do that. Mm-hmm. But in any case, you have an experience of the cup, and that's new, isn't it? So it's not so far-fetched to grasp what is this experience of a cup. Yeah, that's not leaving your body and doing some weird, esoteric thing. That's grasping what that is.
But it feels like I already know what that is. I already know what a cup is.
I know. You know too much, Leo.
Okay, then you can't grasp what a cup is. Because if you know what a cup is, then there's no question possible, is there? Mm-hmm. So you would have to grasp you don't really know what a cup is. Mm-hmm. What the cup is. See? What the cup is. Maybe. And then you have to get that yourself. See? And you'd have to do it directly. You have to grasp what the cup is, what an object is.
And how is directly different from just experiencing it?
Experience is never direct.
Experience is never direct. Ooh. The experience is never direct.
So a direct experience is something that most people have never had in their life before.
As far as I know.
This is so difficult because we have concepts and we have experience. And oftentimes we know conceptually what we're doing. Throughout most of our life, we know what we're doing conceptually. We might even sit down and meditate. I've talked about this before. We sit down and meditate, and we think that we're breathing. We think it. We conceptually know. We know that we're breathing. We're thinking. We're not experiencing it. We're not even down to the direct experience that he's referring to. We're not even just experiencing it in the most normal way. We're thinking too much, and our thoughts are blocking the experience. We get too caught up with, there's this strange hierarchy. I'm glad you like the shirt. The strange hierarchy of our concepts, which is way more important than our actual experiences. This is how our society has trained us, and it's rather unfortunate. We have to tip the balance and switch it. Make sure that we have our direct experiences be important, because they are important. You can make them more important than your conceptualizations, and that's pretty cool. It's a great exercise, and eventually they all become equalized. Your concepts don't override your experiences. Your experiences don't override your concepts. They don't need to be in conflict. They aren't. Nothing needs to cloud anything else. But first, you need to, at least for the first time in your life, have a direct experience. Oh my goodness. What a great day that's going to be. That's going to be extremely interesting. When you first experience a single breath of fresh air and you actually directly experience it. You're not thinking it. You're not conceptualizing it. You're experiencing it.
Yeah, I would imagine that's true.
That seems to be the key there, is because when we first hear about the possibilities of consciousness work, our mind interprets it as thinking like, oh, well, yeah, I kind of know that. Yeah, I kind of know what a cup maybe is, or maybe I don't really know what it is, but if I looked at it long enough, I would know. Or it just seems like the gap is not seen between just regular experience that I have and actual truth.
Yeah, that's where not knowing comes in. So you have to allow yourself not to know. And we're dedicated to knowing. We spend our whole lives, trying to accumulate knowledge and to know what everything is. And, people don't grasp that not knowing is the basis for any kind of questioning, any kind of investigation. You have to genuinely not know. And so if it's a direct experience you're shooting for, or a direct consciousness, you have to directly not know, okay? You have to really, really not know.
Uh-huh.
See? You have to really not know to your quick, which you already do. People don't want to admit that, usually. See? You spend a lifetime avoiding it, see? But getting it, you're really deeply, deeply ignorant, okay? It's like you really, not as a put down, I'm just saying that people really got to get they don't know. Or another way to look at it is what you don't know is what you don't know. Okay? And once you get that you don't know something, then questioning is appropriate. Wondering is appropriate.
What is the deepest, most profound insight you've had in all your consciousness work? Because you've done so much contemplating of many different things and yourself and life and people and all of this. Personally for you, what was your deepest insight and how did it I want to know how it felt to you from a first person perspective, like when you had it.
This is like such a common type of question for the person who's kind of dabbling in this sort of type of, whatever spiritual nonsense that we're getting into here. And we have so much of that materialistic type baggage to bring along with it. I talk about tea a lot. I like to drink tea. I like it. It's lovely. And every time I talk about tea, somebody will ask me, like, what's your favorite tea? Or what was the best tea that you've ever had? What? No, the best tea is the tea that I'm drinking today, right now, currently. That's it. It's always that. Trying to have a best, trying to remember the most exciting, trying to get to some depth of something is the thing that blocks you from actually getting anything at all. So having that mindset of something deeper, some crazy, deep, flashy insights, wanting that is going to stop you from having any sort of insight. So stop it. Stop it. Well, let's see how Peter handles the question. I'm not sure. Deepest insight. What is it?
They were all the deepest.
Of course.
Yeah, it's like really, they're all the deepest. I know that doesn't sound well. It's difficult to split up like that. How did it feel? Well, like nothing at all. It's difficult to explain. But it's always positive. Even after, see, the effect it has on the mind, the effect it has, on the person is always positive. It's always freeing. That's always the case.
It's always free. It's always good. It's always pleasant. It's always perfect. But it's hard to translate into a typical mindset because kind of the process is to get a different mindset, a completely different mindset. When you're training, you're putting on a different mindset. And then what you notice is the in-between mindsets, where there's no mindset. There's no framework, there's no thoughts, there's nothing. Going back to that sort of clothes analogy, you're wearing some clothes, you got some, whatever your beliefs are, built up by society, these are your normal clothes. And then you train, you do some meditation, and you train by putting on different clothes. And at some point you realize that you were naked in between. And you tell somebody, oh my God, I was naked. It was crazy. I had no beliefs, I had no framework, no clothes. And they say, well, what color were the clothes that you were wearing? I wasn't wearing any. I was naked. It was so crazy. What was the fabric? What did it feel like? But I didn't have any clothes on. I'm not sure. I can tell. There was no belief. There was no system. There was no framework. There were no clothes. Well, was it scratchy? Was it soft? It was pleasant, but I don't know. I can't describe it in any other way. I can't use the language of clothing. I can't tell you the color. I can't tell you the size. I can't tell you the fit because that's all within frameworks. But I'm talking about the absence of frameworks, the absence of clothes, the thing that happens in between. How do you talk about that? I don't know.
What was the effect on you in your practical life?
Practical effect. Uh-oh. More questions that just don't apply. Leo has changed so much.
Well, it changed how I related to everything. It changed how I related to me, for sure. I mean, it changed my life in a very fundamental way. It didn't change having to piss, okay? It didn't change, how I make an omelet, all right? See, all of that is still, being human and doing the self stuff. Okay. See, so if you're wondering if it changed any of that, no. Like I said, it had that opening power, so I started to, in the things that I did at the time, they started to just unfold at a very rapid rate. And I pretty also quickly changed my career path. I was going to be a doctor. That's what I was studying at the time. And then it became obvious to me that wasn't what I was going to be doing.
Wow.
Sometimes people ask me, that's funny because sometimes people ask me when I talk about enlightenment to them, they get scared. And I had this fear myself. Does this mean I have to end my career? Does this mean that I have to leave my marriage? Does this mean that I have to move out of this city? Or, it's just like your mind starts to go to this place of, wondering about the negative consequences that this could have to having to change one's life.
Yeah, no, this is not true. You don't have to change your life. You want to change your life. That's very different. And see, if you want to do it, it's not something you have to do, is it? See?
True.
It's very different.
True.
And you don't have to change a thing. You could be an enlightened doctor, you could be a piano player. You could do whatever you want. Anything that you could do before, you can do after. You should probably do it better. And probably you can relate to it differently. See, it's a matter of basically now what it is you want to do with your life.
Grasping is suffering, grasping at not grasping is also suffering. So true. We get so caught up in this, wanting to have some concrete, some very clear conclusion for what happens when you achieve whatever the thing is that is being achieved here. You say, oh, I achieved this thing, therefore I must become a monk, or therefore I must become a hermit, or I must change my jobs. No. You don't change any of that stuff unless you want to change it. Nothing happens except you become more aware of yourself. And that's it. There are no other implications. There's nothing necessary that comes along with that. If you decide that you want to change, well, that's all you. That's fine. That's good. Change. If you decide you want to stay, well, that's great too. Stay.
And also, people have this image of celibate monks and stuff like that, cloistered in monasteries and whatnot.
Yes.
And so if I get enlightened, I'll have to go join them or something. No, they're there to get enlightened. Okay,
Yeah.
They're not there being enlightened. Okay? Hopefully, they are in some cases and stuff like that. And they're working their way through it. See, but that's something done to become enlightened. See, so people have this image of I'll have to go up to a mountain or something. I have to live in a cave. See, no, they got the cart before the horse there.
Yep.
Go live in a cave now, or don't.
Yeah, man. It's that simple. You don't need to do anything. Nothing needs to change. There are no implications except all the implications. Hard to describe here.
Why is it that seeing enlightenment or seeing the truth has a transformational effect on a human being? It seems like people who have these direct experiences then have a transformation in their life. Mm-hmm. Like you said, maybe not something practical like how they cook an omelet, but they do have a transformation. What is the actual mechanism that truth has on transforming the human psyche?
Everything has a transformation.
Yeah, it's quite simple. First of all, there's two sides to this that I would address. One, don't expect transformation. In other words, don't people expect, okay, I'm not going to be human anymore. I'm not going to be myself anymore. I'm not going to have all these mind things anymore, all these character traits. Not true. You will have exactly what you have now.
Yes.
And so if you work for enlightenment so that you can free yourself from that, yes on the one hand, no on the other. Because as a human, what you've crafted will remain. You will still be a human. You will still walk and talk and think and emote. See, but the transformational aspect is that at some point you won't be that anymore. So now how you relate to that now is different. And so changing it becomes much more possible, because if you're not it, you can change it. You still have to change it. And now also, as far as I can tell, just in my own experience and in the experience of people I've watched, some things fall away right away. Why? I have no idea. Okay, that's not true. I do have ideas, but I really don't know.
Tell us.
And you become directly conscious, of something, and then some things are just gone. Some reactions, emotions, ways of thinking of yourself or whatever, just gone. They just go. Others don't. Perhaps you become more deeply conscious and some other things go. But primarily, the whole function of being human will remain. And that's something you have to change deliberately, should you want to do that. Look at any enlightened person or legend of enlightened persons, you see, and kind of look and study them. Yeah. There's always a character there, isn't there?
A character.
So
he also says character a lot, right? This character, this meat suit. Yes.
Person, and they're different one from another. So they don't all they get enlightened and they become this one kind of thing, like that, right? No, there's a character because there was a character there before they became enlightened, you see? And so they are now acting through that character. They will remain acting through that character or change the character. That also happens. So you can become a different character, but you do that purposely, The enlightenment, what it does is give you the consciousness, understanding, if you will, that you aren't any of it. You aren't the character.
Who are you?
You never were the character.
What are you?
Right? You aren't the thinking, the emoting, the reacting. You're not any of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that simple. You have a body. You have a mind. You go farther if you like. You have a spirit. You have a soul. You have a consciousness. What are you? Not the things that you have. Who are you? Most people like to identify with their body and their mind. Some people go farther with the soul or whatever. That's cute. Some people go farther, I guess, with their society, with their families, maybe their relationships. Also very cute. And, it's a fine way of going about the world. But in this, we want to explore the idea that you don't have to be any of those things. Let's look beyond the things that you are identifying as and look at the thing that is identifying. And we see that the things that we are identifying as don't need to be stuck to the identifier. You have a little bit more freedom, and that opens up lots of possibility. It's very nice. Highly recommended.
What is the motivation for self-improvement or for transformation or for change after a deep enlightenment that I'm nothing? Why would then I waste my time and energy to improve myself? Because I don't have deficiencies.
Another big missing part here, like you find out that you're not your body. Does that mean that I must neglect my body, right? So if we have this idea, the reason why people identify with themselves and their body and their mind, well, I don't know why. And they essentially just neglect all the things that they are not. They're mean to other people. They're mean to other things because it's not them. Tragic. This is horrible. This is awful. And they miss the fact that they're also being mean to themselves. They think they're being nice to themselves. You're never being nice to yourself. It's awful. It's a terrible situation. So when you realize that you're not your mind, you're not your body, you're not any of this stuff, that doesn't mean that you need to start neglecting any of that. No, in fact, it may give you the freedom to be much more careful with your mind and your body. Maybe. Of course, there are some people who are just neglectful type of people. Okay, become enlightened, neglect all of it. That's lovely. It's going to be fun. Or you're the type of person who is very careful and systematic, and you care about things, and you expand your circle of empathy. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. You grow a little bit more in a different type of way, and you learn that you are not your body and you're not your mind, and you don't control anything, and so on and so forth. And that gives you better control. It gives you better freedom. It gives you better vision for understanding how all this stuff works. Again, highly recommended.
Right. You may not, but your character might. See?
Yeah.
You might recognize your character has maybe dysfunctional ways of thinking or behaving or emoting and say, okay, that's not useful anymore. And stop it.
Stop it.
Toss it out.
Stop it.
See? Or maybe you want to create a character that's more useful for your piano playing or something. See? Or, what you're trying to do as a human.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me about raising consciousness and getting deeper understanding and grasping the truth for what it really is that it does have consequences in the real world. It's not just a philosophical enterprise, which a lot of times I talk about enlightenment or I talk about some concept or some way to change oneself or to discover the truth and to see something. But then someone hears me talk about that and they say, well, yeah, but how does this really apply to my life? Is it really going to help me? Is it really going to change anything? But what I've discovered is that in a paradoxical sense, like you said, it changes nothing, but also it changes everything.
This is the sort of thing when people say, well, what about reality? Reality is going to slap you in the face and bring you back. At the end of the day, you still have to pay your bills. At the end of the day, you still got to eat some food. At the end of the day, you still got to do normal human stuff. This is kind of the mindset that people have. And they talk about this sort of thing and they think it's airy-fairy, using Leo's language here. Where's the practicality here? Where's the reality? Let's not forget we have to pay our bills. And let's not forget we have to cook. Let's not forget we have to feed our family. Things like this people talk about. And they say, well, all this enlightenment business, all this spirituality, all this philosophy, it sounds nice. It's interesting to think about. But at the end of the day, you have to do things. A man's got to do what a man's got to do. Sure. But at the end of the day, you're going to be suffering. Pay your bills, go to school, all that stuff. That's going to be great. It's going to be cute. But at the end of the day, you're going to be suffering throughout all of it. You're going to be suffering when you go to sleep. You're going to be trying to distract yourself with more things, more stuff, more entertainment, more gadgets, more technology, more video games, more, never satisfied at any point in time in your life. That is the worst thing. That's the most tragic to me, I think, personally. That sounds horrible. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how well you do in society. It doesn't matter what people think about you. At the end of the day, if you're suffering, you're suffering. And that's what we're addressing with this stuff. That's the practicality here. So who cares about your bills? Who cares about your family? Who cares about any of that stuff? If you're suffering, that's the problem. Let's work from there.
Not that it takes you off the hook, though. It's like you think, okay, if I get enlightened, it'll do everything for me. It'll change my life. It'll, etc. No, It won't. Because actually, see, there's no attainment. There's no achieving of something. See? It doesn't provide you with anything that you don't already have, so to speak. It just is a consciousness of what's already true. So you may be ignorant of that, and now you're not. But it didn't change anything because it was already true even when you were ignorant, right? See, it's already true now of you. It's already true now of existence. It's already true now.
But my knowing it could make me more effective in what I'm doing.
Yes.
So even if I am a doctor or a pianist or a cook or whatever, I can do it better. I can do it with less resistance or whatever difficulties I have in progressing there.
Probably, yes.
Because emotions come into play into everything that we do, and our relationship to emotion changes so much from having a grasping the truth.
Even your ability to question what an emotion is. And like I said, you were talking about the cup. Say, what is a cup? Well, people have emotion all the time, and they think they know what it is, only because they recognize it, just like you recognize the cup.
What is it?
So you have something arise in your experience that's like fear or anger or love. And you say, I know what it is because I recognize it. Ah, that's love. That experience is what we call love. Ah, that's that experience. Ah, and that's anger. That's fear. Okay, but what is it? What is fear? Why is it there? How does it come to pass? What is its existence? You see? And people don't know that, but you can. One can. I do. See? And
He does.
by questioning it, somebody who has a few enlightenment experiences doesn't necessarily know what fear is. They may be able to detach themselves from fear, but they don't necessarily know what fear is. You have to investigate it and say, what is this? What is anger? What is love? See, what is it? And then you understand, you start to grasp it. Fear is an activity that's occurring, that's being created by you, and for what purpose it's being created by you, and how it's being created. Having this consciousness provides, perhaps I could say, the space to do that more powerfully than before. Of course, you have that possibility now, so you could question fear now. But after enlightenment, it occurs for you to do so. Before, usually not. See, we're just too busy being run by it rather than looking into what we're run by.
Do you like good energy? Like, comment, and subscribe for more.
Tell me about some cool things you've been able to accomplish with having more consciousness and having had these enlightenment experiences. For example, you were able to win the world championship in contact martial arts. And of course, that's something you've trained for a lot. But I also heard you say how consciousness played into you being successful in that. Or for example, you gave examples and talked about how you're able to go to the dentist and not use painkillers to get your teeth drilled.
What?
So it seems like that is only possible through increases in consciousness.
What?
Well, neither of those examples are only possible through increase of consciousness. People do, win tournaments, and people could probably do this Novocaine thing, but they would have to understand what pain really is.
What?
Pretty much nobody does.
My guy goes to the dentist to get his teeth drilled without using Novocaine. Wow, that is it's an interesting feat, I guess. It's very impressive. That's crazy. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. Don't do that, please. Why would you ever do that? That's ridiculous. What kind of crazy person would ever want to do that? Wow, he really knows what pain is. I certainly don't. Jesus, that sounds awful. Why? Why? You guys don't need to test yourselves with any of these matters here ever. Never, never. Testing is not important. Don't test. Be enlightened. Don't test it. Don't figure out if it's actually true. You don't need to do that. You don't need to get your teeth drilled without Novocaine. This person's a crazy person, and we like it. It's very energizing, and it makes us excited and makes us want to practice and meditate and become more like him. Wow, that's so cool. That's just an energizing and interesting thing to keep us practicing and remind us that we need to be more like ourselves. And I'm guessing most of us aren't the kind of people who need to get their teeth drilled without Novocaine, because that's nonsense. Maybe alternative, brush your teeth, floss, mouthwash, so that you don't need to have your teeth drilled. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure what your situation is. Possibly, maybe, I don't know.
Consciousness allows you to look into things differently. And so as far as the world tournament thing, I was a martial artist. You say I was training. I was kind of obsessed with it before I got enlightened, and so I continued afterwards, and it just turned around. Instead of I was dedicated to just that, I was dedicated to using it as a vehicle for growth and understanding, mastery. like I said, understanding the interaction between two human beings became much more profoundly grasped. What is the most effective way to use the body? What's the most effortless way to use the body, etc.? What are the most effective principles for interaction in that domain? And discovered a lot, as far as I can tell, more than anybody else ever has. So winning the world tournament wasn't very difficult. The people that I was fighting didn't understand these things. And you could tell, I could tell that they did not know what was going on. Right? It was a mystery to them. Somehow they were losing and they didn't know why. I could tell by looking at them, saying it wasn't fitting the normal world that they were used to.
Yeah.
And
interesting
stuff. So that was useful.
It is tough.
Like I said, I wanted to do that so people would listen to me more.
Becoming a martial arts master just so people can listen to you, but then you learn something fundamental, something very interesting and something foundational. You can translate that. You can realize that knowing something is good. Knowing exactly why is helpful. And you can see the confusion in other people's faces when they don't know. Why? Why do these things happen? Why am I losing? Why am I suffering? Why? Oh, you don't know? You don't get it? Oh no. Tragic.
But as far as reality is concerned, anything goes. There are no rules. There are no stipulations, is what enlightenment reveals.
Enlightenment reveals what enlightenment reveals. That's the consciousness itself. Yes, life is meaningless, and it's not a negative. And yes, all sorts of things are invented and created. Which seems like, okay, we just make them up. But no, that's the way it's always been. Reality, it really depends on what we're talking about.
Must you devalue things that are constructed? No, you don't have to.
Seems like there's rules to me. If you're talking about the world that we share, but if you're talking about the real nature of reality or the real nature of existence, there's nothing there or here.
Confirmed nihilist, possibly. But he said life is meaningless doesn't mean anything negative here. It's weird because we get the idea of nihilism being a bad thing or necessarily leading to some sort of depression, possibly, or, some negative. Nihilism, bad. Nihilism means that you're sad or means that you're searching for meaning and this is a problem somehow. It could also be a positive nihilist. Oh, nothing matters. That's good for some reason. Yeah, and that's cute too. Like, you can do that. But if you're just like getting away from meaning at all, no meaning, no meaninglessness, who cares? No good, no bad, whatever. That seems more like this sort of stuff. I feel like that's kind of connected to most of these sort of traditions kind of seem to be pretty nihilistic. None of it matters. Nothing's good, nothing's bad. Not that it's meaningless necessarily in the negative way. It means that evaluating it with meaning is not the appropriate way to evaluate it. Evaluating it with morality, goodness, badness, is not the appropriate way to evaluate it. Just because there's no good doesn't mean that it's all bad. Just because there's no meaning doesn't mean that it's all meaningless. Getting away from the duality here.
Even if all of reality is consciousness, if everything I'm experiencing is consciousness, which is what enlightenment seems to suggest, then there still seems to be the question remaining of, does a particular object have consciousness or sentience? For example, a rock, a tree, a bird, we assume an animal or human probably does, or a rock or a chair doesn't. What insights does enlightenment give us about this?
He's asking for conclusions, lots of conclusions here. He wants to get an answer, definitive answer that distinguishes something from other things, or give me all the conclusions that you have. No conclusions here. No conclusions allowed.
It doesn't give you any insights about that unless you become enlightened what a rock is, and or what consciousness is. In other words, you grasp directly what this stuff is.
And then I can know what has sentience and what doesn't?
You already know what has sentience and what doesn't. Sentience is a distinction, and you make it, right?
You
make a distinction between sentience. You just did.
Yeah.
You said rock is not sentient and bird is.
I mean, I don't really know. Maybe a rock is sentient, so I'm open to that possibility.
In your distinction, you see, which is your experience. In your experience, you've already made that distinction. You already know. That's what sentient is. Now, you may not know what that is directly, but you've already made the experience, the distinction between a rock and sentience. Now, here's something, maybe, I invite you to consider that maybe there's no difference between sentience and a rock.
Maybe no difference? How? Wait a second, what? There's no difference between sentience and a rock. There's no difference between a rock being sentient or not? How do we determine this? How do we figure this out? Are rocks sentient? Are things alive? He said a chair. Rocks and chairs, are they sentient? I always wonder, how do we determine if other people are sentient? Kind of ask them questions, maybe they figure out how they respond to you. You ever asked a rock a question? You ever asked your chair if it's sentient or not? See how it responds? Very easy first step to determine if these things are conscious, sentient beings that interact in the world. Do it in the same way that you determine if a human is conscious, sentient being that interacts in the world. How do you determine if a person, let's say, is alive? Yeah, your chair lifts you up when you're tired. Always there for you, man. Foundation for a lot of us. Foundation for a lot of your being, your existence here. I've got a nice little cushion here. Keep me up, keep me comfortable, at least mostly comfortable. And I've got a zabuton? A cushion under my cushion. Very nice, very nice. Interview the rock next and ask him about sentience, yes. You just ask the question. I mean, this is a very basic thing. When you see a person and you say, oh, is this person alive? Is this person sentient? Is this person conscious? What do you do to the person to figure it out? Sometimes you have to shake them. Sometimes you have to ask them a question. Sometimes you have to prod them sort of emotionally and see if you can connect on an emotional level. There are various different ways to do this. Have you ever done that to your chair? Have you ever done that to a rock? If not, it might be helpful to try and you might learn something very bizarre. I like to suggest doing it with your bed. Your bed's a very easy one to test, I think, personally. Yeah. See if your bed's alive, see if your bed's conscious, see if your bed's sentient. In the same way that you might want to see if, you sometimes talk to people, maybe just somebody who's a little closed off. You get the idea that they're human because they talk and stuff, but you don't have any sort of connection at all. You don't think, they might be robots. They might have no emotions at all. They might not actually have the lights on. So how do you figure it out? You kind of talk to them. You say, okay, I want to poke and prod a little bit more. I want to get to the depths of this person. I want to find the person. I want to find the life. I want to find the sentience in this person. You ask lots of questions. It might take years for some people to open up and really express themselves and really show that they are alive, that they are actually sentient. Do you give that grace? Do you give that opportunity to anything else other than people? Do we see how foolish our methodology has been? Try it with your bed. Try it with a random rock. Try it with a chair. Try it. Things might be a little strange.
Maybe there's no difference between, a rock and consciousness. The difference between a rock and sentience is relative. Ta-da!
Your bed's giving you the silent treatment. Oh no, don't neglect it. Don't neglect it. Yeah, it's hard to get back in the good graces of the bed sometimes. If you've been neglecting your bed, you've been mean to your bed, you've only been talking to your bed about, and you want to open up and see other parts of it. It's kind of hard. It might take a while. Good luck.
We assume that humans have sentience, and we assume that rocks don't.
We assume all sorts of things.
But is it possible that science one day proves that a rock does have sentience?
Has science proved that you are sentient? Is that the mechanism? Is that the test that we ever do? Why do we always point to science for this? You don't need science to prove to yourself that you are sentient, do you? Do you need science to prove to yourself that your dog is sentient? Do you need science to prove to yourself that your family, your friend, your closest friends, your parents, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, the people that you relate to, does science need to prove that they are sentient? What nonsense. We never used that mechanism before. Why are we appealing to it currently? No, use the same thing that you've been doing for every other test of sentience. Keep doing that one. Just do that test to more things. Stop being so selective.
I have no idea if science is going to prove rock does have sentience.
Science.
I'm saying we don't know what sentience is. Mm-hmm. We don't know what a rock is. Mm-hmm. Okay? See, and you're asking, is a rock sentient or not rock sentient, et cetera, like that. Find out what a rock is.
So are you saying that with direct consciousness, I can figure out what the answer is, or that it's just open to scientific investigation in the future?
I mean, it's always open to any investigation, in the future. You have no idea what science is going to come up with in the future, right? It's wide open. It's all relative, though.
One thing that strikes me about your work is it doesn't really focus on what I might call the universal love aspect of enlightenment. A lot of other teachers stress the love component of enlightenment. They even have the question of what is love?
I like love.
But your work and your workshops, your books, as far as I can tell, don't really use that word or stress that concept very much at all. I'm just curious why that is.
People have different emphases.
Love is a relative experience.
Oh.
And for most people, love is an emotion.
It's very confusing if you use words that mean something already.
It's also an enticement. People use love as an enticement, just like peace, harmony, love, etc. It sounds really good.
Yeah.
So come join my community. It's about these things. You'll get these things, and everybody wants those.
We'll get purity, we'll get respect, we'll get harmony and tranquility here. That's what we get from this teaching, the lovely teaching of tea. That's all we'll get. And it sounds really nice, of course.
So it's easy to join, but I don't want to mislead people.
Yes.
So I don't put out enticements. And I also try not to, as best I can now, I say a lot of things I didn't say before because I don't want to plant in people's minds in the work stuff is just going to get in the way.
Yep.
See?
Yeah.
Like answers.
That makes a lot of sense. You would be causing more problems, right? Because obviously, well, it's not obvious for some people. When we talk about purity, it's not the same thing that most people think of. We talk about respect, not the same thing most people think of. When we talk about harmony, absolutely not the same thing. And tranquility, oh boy, that's very, very different from what we think of with tranquility. Stop thinking. Don't use that function. We have a whole different language system, a whole different mechanism for relating these ideas. And then we even go beyond those. And that's fun. It's cute. So we don't want to get too caught up in the words. That's why a lot of people don't like to talk about God, because we get too caught in those words. So it's so tricky. But sure, use the words if you like. Use the words if people aren't getting too caught up in them. Use the words if they're energizing and helping people get through and actually do some work. But don't use it if they catch people, or sometimes it does, and makes it more of a problem when the medicine becomes the illness. Don't let that happen. That's tragic.
So I avoid that. I try not to plant things, you see. I try not to tell people, oh, this is that, and this is the other thing. Except now I tell them it's nothing, but I figure that's not going to do them any good anyway.
Yeah.
See? Because it won't mean anything. But love is a side effect. And the love that occurs from enlightenment isn't an emotion, and it's not a personal thing. It's as if a connection with everyone. See, now that sounds a little airy-fairy.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think it comes out more like a desire to help people because you are people or some such thing. I'm not saying this very well, but like the compassion, you see? The compassion to me shows up by how I can serve people, how I can serve them, how I can assist them, how I can facilitate them in getting it themselves, see? In grasping.
And again, it's so tricky because the I there, it's not what you think of. The others, not what you think of. The service, very, very different. And getting it, we have no idea what that means. All these statements are vacuous, completely empty because all the words don't mean the things that you think they mean. And there's no reference for any of it. It's so difficult.
Grasping stuff for themselves and grasping this thing for themselves.
Let's help others do it.
That to me is compassion, Entertaining them with ideas of love doesn't mean that love is in any way bad.
Love is real, boys. It's pretty dope. Highly recommended. Don't get caught up, though, with the language. Might not be what you think it means.
Give me an idea of how much work you did to achieve the profound depths of consciousness that you have.
Profound.
Just, I want practically to get a sense of, like, what did you actually do?
Nothing.
Like, from the point where you started to get into enlightenment work, and then you had all these realizations, like, what did you do? Like, you sat down every day and you contemplated how many hours, how many days, how many years?
It's so difficult to describe the method for getting anything because there's no method. There are lots of methods for erasing your typical normal worldview, and those are kind of cute and those are kind of fun. But at some point, something else happens, and it's not based on the method. It's not caused by anything, and it's hard to really get beyond all that. The method is to systematically untangle and essentially contradict your own current worldview. And you don't want to believe the contradictions. You don't want to devalue your worldview in order to dismiss it. No. You're trying on new clothes, remember? Trying on new clothes. Take off your shirt, put on a different shirt. Okay? You have this idea of cause and effect. Take that off, put on something different. Put on randomness. You've got this idea of self, me being the end of my skin. Take off those clothes, put on something different. Now you are expansive and you're everything. Okay? It's cute, it's nice, it's fun. Just keep doing that. And at some point, you'll realize that you don't have to put on more clothes. You can just take them off. There's no real method for understanding or feeling or doing. It's kind of beyond methods. It's trans-methodal. Method. Again, difficult to describe. The practical methods are very helpful. Do things Very simply, do things that help you, energize you to investigate. Do things that energize you to investigate. That's the most practical way of putting it, I think. And investigate. Just keep watching, keep paying attention, keep looking. It's all that's necessary.
Pretty much my whole life.
Whole life.
Pretty much 24/7. The amount of work that I've done, and there's no requisite. Like, you don't have to earn your chops by putting in so many hours and none of that is true. You can become conscious right now. People don't tend to become conscious right now, but
Yeah.
you can.
I would go a little bit stranger and say people just don't tend to remember. The same way, it's like you have dreams every single night, and there's so much weird stuff that goes on, and you accept it all. Who cares? Who cares if gravity doesn't work? Who cares if your perspective changes from your own personal perspective to one of your friends' perspectives to some locational perspective? You don't need to even be in the perspective of a person. But you don't recognize this because you're not paying attention to your dreams. All this weird stuff happens. It's so crazy. Then you wake up and you forget it all. Same here. You probably have had this same realizations that Peter Ralston is talking about currently many, many times during the duration of this conversation, and you just filter it out with your mind because we're too caught up thinking about our mind. We have this habit pattern, valuing our minds more so than our experiences. So we conveniently filter out all of these interesting things that happen, and we filter out all of these realizations, attainments, whatever you're gonna call it. But you have them, probably, maybe, allegedly. My own claim here. You have them, and you're just conveniently forgetting them, filtering things out, and you can stop doing that. Or you can stop needing to do that. You don't need to be enlightened. Who cares? You do not need to be limited to your own experiences. So one thing that you might learn, you might find out that there's more going on than what you can do, than what you are controlling. In fact, the outside world is connected to you. It might be important to recognize. So you aren't limited to your own experiences. Other people doing things and other people's experiences affect you. You're not limited to your own experiences. So you don't even need to experience enlightenment in the way that most people want to have some sort of fancy experience. You don't need to experience that to be affected by that. Stop limiting yourself to your experiences. That's a good first step.
Some people will contemplate for decades and decades.
Oh no.
And
never get it. Oh no.
maybe not, grasp very, very deeply. And some people will contemplate for a little while and grasp quite deeply. In my case, there was just investigation going on all the time. Sometimes, when I watch people working, I have an empathetic reaction in the sense of how hard it must be for them to grasp some of these things that I'm sharing or trying to facilitate them in grasping because of the staggering amount of work I did. That's inhuman. Of course, I didn't know that particularly at the time because that's all I was doing. But when I look back at it, or over time, when I've been paying more and more attention to other people, and what they do and how they do it, what I did was unusual. But, it doesn't have to be that way.
Doesn't have to be. So he's telling us he did some unusual superhuman things, and of course he's getting to some superhuman levels, getting his teeth drilled without Novocaine. Okay, I'm stuck on that. That's really bizarre. Wow, what a weirdo. But you don't need to do any bizarre, strange things you don't need to have these crazy feats, and you don't need to have anything special happen to expand your consciousness. Let me share what tea has taught me. I learned when I drank tea very early on that things that I think are not important are very important. That's it. I drank tea. I started drinking tea. I started drinking a lot of tea, and I developed a caffeine addiction for the first time. I never drank coffee before that, and that was interrupting my sleep. I started getting headaches, and that was a problem. So I drank tea in the morning as opposed to at night, and I stopped having headaches, and it made so much of my life so much better because I wasn't having headaches and I was sleeping a little bit better. The direct contrast was so striking to me because I never thought that drinking something would have a long-lasting effect on me. I'd eat unhealthy foods, and I didn't care. It didn't bother me at all. I didn't go to sleep very regularly or in any sort of routine type of way. And, who cares? Who cares about sleep? Most people are in this state. Sleep doesn't matter. It's not that big a deal. You can catch up on it on the weekends, in this sort of mindset. I thought this for a long time, and then I started drinking tea, and I realized, oh yeah, my thoughts are wrong. Oh yeah, what I think is not important is actually very important. Oh, I am not limited, me personally, to the things that I think I should be limited to. No. The world isn't just logic. The world isn't just physics and music. No. The world is so much more, like sleep. And that's it. There we go. Giant expansion of consciousness. Wow. And now I'm here. That's all you need. You don't need very much. You don't need to work very hard. It can happen accidentally. That was accidentally. It can happen accidentally. That was well before I learned anything about any of this nonsense. That's all you need to recognize that you aren't limited. Stop being limited. It's tragic to feel, to think that you are separate. It's so tragic to think that these things aren't affecting you when they so profoundly affect you, right? The media that you watch, the unwholesome things that we consume, unfortunate foods that we eat, our unfortunate lack of exercise, our lack of social interaction, all these things are profoundly affecting us. Yet a lot of us think that we're too smart for it or something. I don't know. It's tragic. Something as basic as that will be enough to open up your mind for some people, maybe. Just drinking a cup of tea will help you learn and see the secrets of the world and expand your consciousness, possibly. I don't know. Worked for me, accidentally. But of course, tea is the most popular drink in the world. A lot of people have caffeine addictions. Maybe you won't get it. I don't know.
Ramana Maharshi had a very, very, very deep enlightenment in a matter of minutes, as far as I can tell. Pretending he was dead on the floor, trying to find out, what's beyond death and all that kind of stuff, when he was very young. He's still a teenager.
Might take years. Might take a single cup of tea. Might take a moment of pretending that you're dead. Who knows? Try it. Good luck.
So what do you think it was in you that drove you to have this kind of obsessive, maybe curiosity or fascination or something like that about truth or existence? Because you seem to be really passionate about truth.
It's just always obvious to me. That was always important to me. That was the thing to do. I have no idea. After I had the first few enlightenments, buckled down and started to really work, I thought, that came too easily. So, and then I had the thought, well, maybe I'm just catching up to where I was before, kind of like lifetime kind of deal, right? Maybe I just caught up and now the real work began. Anyway, that's just a thought.
Do you think some people are just genetically or biologically predisposed to have a personality type, for example, that values truth more or is more spiritually minded or more spiritually accomplished or adept? For example, there are people who are more muscular biologically. And there are people who are maybe better mathematicians because of the way their mind works.
Oh, no.
I know.
Yeah, this is all based on science. Science is the foundation of our reality. Everything is based on your genes in your brain. Come on, Leo. He's so far away. But this is, of course, 4 or 5 years ago. He's gone beyond this. He's not limiting himself to some sort of genetic analysis of a person to see how well adept they are for this type of field. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Go beyond
I don't
that.
think so. Because you are who you are. You are what you are.
You are.
And like I said, all those other things are relative, even genetics. Now, it might be that some people in their particular character or maybe their upbringing or interests or whatever are more predisposed to discipline or to investigate things, whatever. I don't know, but I don't know.
What reforms do you think are necessary on a social level and on a societal level, on a political level?
Reform.
To
Necessary.
Make enlightenment more widespread.
Hey.
Because it's such a rare thing. It's so rare to find enlightened people or enlightened teachings even in the culture at all.
Do we need more?
Honesty and openness. If we had cultural values, if widespread we had cultural values of real honesty, questioning, openness, I think that would be useful.
What's going on during deep sleep? So I don't mean when I'm dreaming. Obviously, I'm having some kind of sensations. But when I'm totally out of it, there seems to be no consciousness there, no awareness there. It seems like it's as though I never existed. So what is that? Is that an illusory state that I don't exist? Or is that my true nature? Is that what I am when I get enlightened? It seems like there's something fishy going on there.
All right. Obviously, it's not what you are when you get enlightened. Because when you're in deep sleep, you're ignorant, right? It's like you have no idea what's going on, right? Deep sleep's deep sleep. You go.
You.
Hallelujah.
But it seems like nothingness.
That's right.
Is that what you mean by nothingness when you say your nature is nothingness?
No, that's not what I mean by nothingness. That's what I mean by deep sleep. What I'm saying is you go. You stop. Your mind stops. Your self stops. And like I said, hallelujah. You need that. Everybody needs that, right? So even just biologically. Interesting, though, isn't it? The interesting thought that you have to go away in order for your body to survive. But really, it's just your mind shuts down. So that's awareness.
He's using you in various different ways here, but he means you, all the things, memories and expectations that you have, whatever. You, the thing that you think intends to do things. You, go away. Of course, your body's here. Mind is just quiet. That's it.
That's awareness. That's cognition. That stops, and you're left with nothing. Ramana Maharshi said, you're closer to who you are when you're in deep sleep.
So that deep sleep state is probably the closest experience I have to my true nature, if I'm not enlightened yet.
Closest.
I wouldn't say that because, like I said, you're completely ignorant, so it doesn't really help. Not knowing is the closest you can get to your true nature. Genuine, deep not knowing.
One thing that always was on my mind, I'm very philosophically minded, so I like to do thought experiments. As soon as I learned about enlightenment, here's the problem I had. When we're in a dream state, when we're sleeping, we don't really recognize sometimes that we're in a dream state. So we're like really in it.
Yep.
And then we wake up and realize, oh, it was just a dream. Then we can learn about enlightenment. We can maybe have an enlightenment experience or two. And then it's like analogous to that. It's like we had the waking state, and then I can be really awake. I can be spiritually awake. And then it seems like that's kind of like where it stops. But then, my philosophical mind continues, kind of extrapolates on that and says, well, what if even the things that we're calling absolute truth, the infinity, the nothingness that I grasp through direct experience, and I do a lot of work like you've done, but is there still not a possibility that all of that is still within some paradigm, and that there's an even higher or a deeper paradigm that hasn't yet been accessed, or may be impossible to access just given the limits of the mind and the fact that we are human beings and so forth?
Interesting. More enlightened than enlightened, more awakened than awakened, more infinite than infinity. There's some scale. You go farther deeper into like the most basic fundamental sort of thing. And that's where a lot of these guys are talking about what enlightenment is, getting aware of the awareness, so on and so forth. And they say that that's the foundation of everything. And that's it. You don't get more foundational than you being awareness. Your awareness being every interaction or everything. That same awareness is being shared by everything, every interaction. You don't really get more foundational than that. But you can go the opposite direction and get more abstract. There's a bit of a bias by using the language of the spiritual teachings. They kind of use absolute to refer to the absolute, the end. And if we kind of use that language, we're kind of being stuck in there. So maybe there's a even more strange type of language where we get beyond the notion of relative truth, absolute truth, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And we use language that doesn't get hijacked by our intellectual mind. And we also don't use the language that gets hijacked by our spiritual mind, or whatever you want to call that. Maybe. I think this is a fine question. Probably a better question to ask after you've grasped it the first time, but probably not everything else.
No.
How can you be so certain about
There's
that?
no more truth than truth. There's no more infinite than infinite.
This is not possible. It's not possible. Everything you described is relative. You can't get more absolute than absolute. Okay?
But isn't that being judged from the lower paradigm in the same way that if I, let's say, wasn't enlightened, I would say, well, it's not possible to be enlightened because, look, this is all that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
No.
No.
Because our notions of possibility, what informs that of what's possible and not possible? Isn't that assumptions we have?
Possibility is wide open. It's infinite.
Absolutely.
But infinity is no more than infinity. Infinite doesn't exist. It's not lots and lots. So you can't get more infinite than infinite. So you can't get more absolute than absolute.
Unless for some reason we're wrong about that and we don't realize it.
We're wrong. Right? Wrong?
Alrighty.
Okay. Try it out.
But that's not a possibility.
Not really, no. In the relative domain, there's infinite possibilities, and there always will be, and it'll never stop. You can learn forever. You can create more distinctions forever. Why? That's the nature of consciousness.
And everything is consciousness.
Okie dokie. Everything is exactly what it is.
And we can use whatever word we want to describe it.
Well,
I'm starting to hear Leo getting a little frustrated from his voice here.
I would avoid raspberry. You see, but it's just getting silly now.
Everything is raspberry. Everything is raspberry. I think that the question that Leo asked is not necessarily a problem. It's not necessarily too bad. What is there? Is there something more infinite than infinite? The problem is that we can tell, everybody knows, we can all see that Leo, at least when he's asking this question, has not ventured enough. He's still stuck in his normal relativistic mind. So when he says more infinite, he means more in the normal, typical relativistic sense, relativistic being the opposite of the absolute sense. He's not sitting in that sort of absolute consciousness, awareness, spiritual language that we want to be using at some point. And if you were saying from that space, Is there something more infinite than infinite? Is there something more absolute than absolute? Is there something more true than truth? Is there something more real? Is there something beyond all this stuff? I mean, we can talk about that. It's an interesting conversation. We can get more beyond. We can go farther past infinite. We can go outside of absolute infinity. We can get outside of truth. We can get outside of all of reality. You can get outside of all of it. Awareness, sure, but baby steps. So you got to get to awareness first. You got to understand awareness. You got to be sitting in awareness before you can try to go beyond any of that stuff. Because you're so trapped in what it means to be beyond. Because I even say beyond, we get beyond it, and we think of the notion of what beyond means within the relativist paradigm, than a typical paradigm. I mean here. That's not what I mean. That's not what beyond means. You go beyond absolute infinity. It's not the beyond that happens inside of absolute infinity. It's a different beyond. But it gets confusing with the language if you're not used to the space, if you're not used to the stuff, if you don't even know what absolute infinity is. It's pointless to talk about it. Not necessarily a bad question, but you certainly can't know more. You can't get more fundamental. You can't get more foundational. Use whatever words you want. Don't call it raspberry though. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not there. Get there first, and then we can talk more.
Tell me about distinctions, because one thing you talk about in your work is there seems to be a special significance to distinctions, because the distinction, you don't even classify it as a thought. And it's hard for me to wrap my mind around what a distinction even is.
Okay. Well, good. That brings me to, a thought is a distinction. A distinction is everything. Everything is a distinction. In my new book, The Genius of Being, which is the end of a trilogy, starting with the Book of Not Knowing, which lays the foundation, and Pursuing Consciousness, which moves on, and then The Genius of Being, which hasn't come out yet, but look forward to 2017. In The Genius of Being, I do a whole thing on distinction. That'll probably clear it all up for you. But distinction is everything. It's everything you perceive and everything that is in the relative domain. The absolute is not a distinction. We make a distinction between absolute and relative. That's a distinction. But then what we think of absolute, or how we hold absolute and how we hold relative, that's a distinction. That's not absolute.
The penultimate absolute, the absolute that is opposed to relative. Nice, cool distinction. Then you actually grasp.
Very mind-boggling.